Some people will never respect you, no matter how kind, patient, or giving you are. Not because you've done something wrong, but because respecting others requires self-awareness. And not everyone is willing to look that deep within themselves. You could bend over backwards, explain your heart out, give them your time, your care, your silence, and they'll still cross the line. It hurts. It's frustrating. And for many of us walking the path of compassion and mindfulness, it creates a quiet inner war. How do you stand firm without becoming hard? How do you protect your peace without abandoning your principles? In the teachings of the Buddha, there's a middle way, a powerful path between passive acceptance and reactive anger. It's the path of clarity, presence, and inner dignity. The Buddha didn't teach us to argue or fight for respect. He taught us to live in such a way that our very presence sets a boundary. In today's video, we're going to explore how Buddhist wisdom can help you deal with people who disrespect you without ever losing your peace or your power. This isn't just about theory, it's real, grounded, and it works. So don't skip any part of this video, because each teaching builds on the next. And by the end, you'll have 5 deeply effective ways to handle disrespect from a place of self-respect and serenity. And hey, if you appreciate the calm, clarity, and insight we bring here each week, there's a small free favor I'd love to ask of you. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know, and it means we can keep sharing more of this wisdom from the heart of Buddhism directly with you. Let's get started. There's something deeply unsettling about being on the receiving end of someone's disrespect, especially when it catches you off guard. It could be a passive-aggressive comment in front of others, a dismissive tone that tells you your opinion doesn't matter, or someone blatantly cutting you off in a conversation like your words carry no weight. In that moment, it's easy to feel your peace slipping away. Maybe your heartbeat speeds up, or your mind races for the right thing to say back. But what if you didn't have to react at all? What if your stillness was the loudest answer you could give? Buddhism teaches us that power doesn't come from control over others. It comes from control over ourselves. The Buddha never encouraged us to battle with others for dominance or demand their respect. He simply taught presence, how to be so deeply rooted in our own awareness that we become unshakable. And one of the simplest but most powerful practices that grows from this awareness is the silent gaze. It's not about aggression, not about intimidation. It's about embodiment. It's about letting your very presence say, "I see your behavior, and I choose not to be moved by it." You don't need to speak for your self-worth to be real. You don't need to retaliate for your dignity to remain intact. There's a quiet kind of strength that rises when you meet disrespect, not with defense, but with stillness. Think of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. As Mara, the personification of fear, doubt, and temptation, tried everything to pull him from his seat, the Buddha didn't argue. He didn't lash out. He simply observed, calm, still, awake, and in that presence, Mara's power dissolved. When someone tries to provoke you, what they're really looking for is your reaction. That's what gives them control. If they can get you flustered, if they can make you doubt yourself, if they can force you to defend your truth, they feel powerful. But when you offer them a calm, silent stare, a moment of pure, grounded presence, you interrupt their game. You don't just confuse them, you hold up a mirror. You force them to sit with their own behavior without distraction. I remember being in a conversation where someone continuously interrupted me, dominating the space as if my voice didn't matter. I tried to interject politely a few times. I smiled. I nodded, but it only got worse. So I stopped talking. I leaned back slightly, folded my hands and looked directly at them. No expression, no anger, just presence. And in that pause, something shifted. They faltered. Their words stumbled. Others in the room turned to them, not me. And suddenly the power they were trying to use to silence me turned back on them. From that day forward, they treated me differently. Not because I demanded it, but because I showed them I wouldn't be invisible. The silent gaze isn't about dominance, it's about refusing to lower your energy just to meet someone else's chaos. It's about sending a message, not just to them, but to yourself. That message is, I don't have to explain my worth. I know who I am. And once you begin to live from that space, people feel it. They sense your rootedness. And whether they say it out loud or not, they think twice before crossing the same line again. Sometimes the deepest peace isn't found in what you say, it's found in what you don't say. There's this belief many of us carry, often unconsciously, that silence means defeat, that if we don't defend ourselves, speak up, or correct someone's disrespect, we're letting them win. But in Buddhist teachings, silence isn't a weakness, it's wisdom. The Buddha himself often remained silent when challenged, when insulted, questioned, or misunderstood. Not because he didn't have something to say, but because he knew not every situation deserves a reaction. There's a calm kind of strength in being able to sit with your peace untouched while someone else tries to pull you into their storm. Think about it. What's really happening when someone disrespects you? Most of the time, it's not about you. It's about them, their ego, their pain, their unmet needs, their need to feel superior or in control. And when you respond with frustration or defend yourself unnecessarily, you're giving them exactly what they wanted, access to your energy. But when you remain still, breathe and stay silent, you starve that energy. You take your power back without saying a single word. In that space of silence, you're sending a message much louder than any argument ever could. I don't owe you my energy. I don't need to perform for your approval. The Dhammapada tells us, hatred is never appeased by hatred. It is appeased by non-hatred. This is an eternal law. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful form of non-hatred. It's not passive, it's deliberate, it's not weak, it's precise. And it doesn't mean you agree with what's being said. It means you're choosing not to carry the emotional burden that comes with reacting to it. I remember a moment when someone I knew constantly slipped in disrespectful comments disguised as jokes, the kind that leaves you second-guessing yourself, wondering if you're being too sensitive. One day during yet another one of these jabs, I didn't respond. I didn't laugh it off, defend myself, or try to educate them. I just looked at them and let the silence stretch. No emotion, no tension, just complete stillness. And in that silence, something shifted. They got uncomfortable. They looked away. And over time, those comments stopped. Silence, when used mindfully, acts like a mirror. It forces the other person to sit with themselves, to reflect. And that's often more powerful than any comeback. Because most people who disrespect others do it for attention, validation, or power. Take away the reward and their behavior loses fuel. It's like how the Buddha taught detachment, not just from material things, but from the need to control or be understood by others. You're not here to fix everyone, you're here to walk your path in peace. But let's also be honest, it takes practice. It's not always easy to sit in silence when your mind is screaming to speak up, defend, or explain. But that's where mindfulness comes in. When you become aware of that urge and you meet it with compassion instead of action, something powerful happens inside you. You start realizing you don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to explain your every move. And most importantly, you don't need to react just because someone else is trying to provoke you. In that moment of chosen silence, you are embodying presence, dignity, and self-respect. Silence isn't just about what you withhold from others. It's also about what you protect within yourself, your energy, your peace, your clarity. Every time you choose silence over conflict, you're nurturing that inner stillness the Buddha spoke of. You're saying to the world, my peace is sacred, and not everyone gets access to it. There's something incredibly exhausting about constantly feeling like you need to justify yourself. It starts with small things. why you didn't attend an event, why you made a personal choice, why you changed your path, and suddenly your entire life feels like it's on trial. People ask with innocent faces, but the tone behind the question makes it clear. They're not asking because they care. They're asking because they don't understand, and maybe don't even respect your decision. And without realizing it, you begin to over-explain, to seek approval, to mold your words into something that will make them nod in agreement. But the more you explain, the more they question, and the more you begin to question yourself. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and that includes attachment to others' opinions. When you shape your life around being understood, accepted, or praised by everyone, you become a prisoner of their perceptions. You give them power over your peace. One of the greatest forms of freedom is the ability to make a choice and not explain it, not because you're hiding anything, but because you trust your own wisdom. The Dhammapada says, "The wise do not speak idle words, but speak the truth with purpose." And sometimes, the most purposeful thing you can say is simply, "This felt right for me." People often feel entitled to an explanation because your decisions threaten their comfort. When you take a leap, quit a job, end a relationship, start a spiritual practice, they see it as a mirror reflecting their own stagnation. Your courage disrupts their complacency, so instead of facing their discomfort, they poke holes in your choices, hoping to make you doubt them too. But Buddhist teachings remind us that your path is yours alone. You are walking your karma, cultivating your own awakening. Others may not understand it, and that's okay. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself. I remember when I left a well-paying job to pursue something more aligned with my heart. Friends asked, "Why would you give that up?" Some were subtle, others blunt. At first I'd explain, talk about how I wanted meaning, how I had a plan, but it never seemed to satisfy them. The more I justified, the more resistance I met. Until one day I simply said, "Because I needed to." That was it. And the silence that followed was powerful. There was nothing left for them to debate. I wasn't seeking their approval. I was standing in my own truth. When we stop explaining ourselves, we start trusting ourselves. We stop handing over our clarity for others to dissect. We start choosing presence over performance, and something beautiful happens. We begin to feel lighter, freer, more grounded. This doesn't mean you shut people out or become defensive. It just means you stop trying to convince them of what only your soul needs to understand. You begin to live more in alignment with what the Buddha called right view, seeing things as they are, not as others expect them to be. It might feel uncomfortable at first. You might worry that people will misunderstand you, judge you, or pull away. And maybe some will. But those who truly respect you will not require endless justification. They will feel the quiet confidence in your decisions, and over time so will you. You'll see that your energy is better spent living your life than defending it, that your peace is worth more than their approval, and that your silence, when chosen with intention, is not weakness, it's wisdom. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that builds when you're constantly around people who chip away at your energy. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's in the form of backhanded compliments, subtle dismissals, or the feeling that no matter what you do, you're being judged from the corners of someone's mind. You smile through it. You try to understand. You even convince yourself that maybe you're being too sensitive. But deep down you know it's not right. Buddha taught that the company we keep shapes the quality of our mind. In the Dhammapada he said, "A person is not a companion just because they are near. The true companion is one who brings peace, and sometimes the most compassionate choice you can make, for yourself and even for them, is distance." We often feel guilty for pulling away, especially when it's someone we've known for a long time, a friend, a colleague, even a family member. There's this belief that love or loyalty means enduring discomfort. But Buddhism doesn't ask us to carry pain just to prove our devotion. It teaches discernment. Not everyone deserves to sit in the front row of your life. Just like a garden must be protected from weeds if it is to thrive, your inner peace must be guarded from people who pollute it with disregard and disrespect. This isn't about cutting people off coldly or reacting with anger. It's about gently stepping back. With compassion, yes, but also with clarity. Distance doesn't mean resentment. It means recognition. It's recognizing that some connections have become heavy and the weight isn't yours to carry anymore. Buddha walked away from a palace, from familiarity, from what no longer aligned with his truth, not in rebellion, but in search of freedom. Likewise, stepping away from people who do not respect your boundaries is not an act of bitterness. It's a return to yourself. There was a time in my life when I kept someone close, even though every interaction left me feeling small. I told myself they meant well, that I should be more patient, but with every gathering, every message, I felt more drained. And then one day I realized I had started adjusting my behavior just to avoid their disapproval. I wasn't being myself around them. And the Buddha's words echoed in my mind. You yourself must strive. The Buddhas only point the way. No one else was going to protect my peace for me. I had to do it. So I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't confront them or try to win them over. I simply stopped giving them so much access. I saw them less, responded slower, made space for silence. And in that space, I began to breathe easier. I noticed my energy returning. I started showing up more fully for the people who did respect me, for the friendships that nourished instead of drained. And over time, I realized distance is not punishment, it's preservation. And yes, some people may not understand. They may call you cold, selfish, even dramatic, but that's okay. Their misunderstanding does not mean you're wrong. The Buddha was often misunderstood too. His teachings were challenged, his choices were questioned, but he remained rooted in what was right, not what was popular. You're allowed to do the same. You don't need to justify protecting your peace. Let people earn their way back into your life with consistency, care, and consciousness. Until then, keep your distance, not in anger, but in wisdom. That is the path of the peaceful warrior, and that is the way of the Buddha. There's something deeply empowering about walking into a space and not needing anyone to validate your worth. You're not there to impress. You're not there to defend yourself. You're simply there, aware, grounded, whole. That kind of presence doesn't come from trying to prove yourself. It comes from knowing yourself. And that's exactly what people who disrespect you often try to shake. They want to see if they can make you second-guess who you are, to shrink a little in your own skin, to carry just enough self-doubt that their words start to matter more than your truth. But the moment you stop needing their respect, something shifts. You become untouchable, not because you're hardened, but because you're rooted. The Buddha once said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." That's not just about spiritual liberation, it's about emotional freedom too. When you hold your head high in the face of criticism or judgment, you're walking that path. You're no longer seeking refuge in other people's opinions. You're finding refuge in your own heart, in your own clarity, in your own practice. And that's not arrogance, that's presence, that's awakening. There was a time in my life when someone close to me would always throw subtle insults into conversations. They didn't raise their voice or say anything overtly cruel. It was always disguised as a joke or casual observation. But every word was like a little needle. For a while I let it slide. I laughed it off. I tried to explain myself. I even wondered if maybe I was being too sensitive. But deep down, I felt it. That quiet sting, that subtle collapse inside. Until one day I decided I was done. Not with anger, not with confrontation, but with clarity. I showed up to the next conversation with my shoulders back, my head high, and a calm in my chest. And every time a dig was thrown, I didn't shrink. I didn't flinch. I just looked at them with steadiness. I smiled, not to appease, but because I knew I didn't need to play along anymore. Holding your head high isn't just about posture, it's about energy. It's about not letting someone else's chaos disrupt your center. It's a message without words that says, I know who I am, and I don't need you to confirm it. Buddha taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. So when your mind is filled with self-respect, self-trust, and awareness, you radiate that without needing to say a single word. People feel it. And the ones who thrive on diminishing others, they don't quite know what to do with that. Now let's be honest, this doesn't mean people will stop trying to test you. In fact, some may push even harder, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your confidence disrupts the narrative they've created about who you should be. But that's not your burden to carry. The more you practice walking tall, not with pride, but with peaceful knowing, the less those comments will even register. It becomes like background noise. You hear it, but it doesn't stick, it doesn't pierce. And here's something beautiful. When you hold your head high consistently, not only do people start treating you differently, but you start treating yourself differently. You stop tolerating disrespect in all its forms, not just from others, but from yourself too. You stop talking down to yourself in your own mind. You start moving through life like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to live for. No one can take your peace unless you hand it to them, and today, you've taken it back, not with anger, but with awareness. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, clarity over chaos, and dignity over drama, you're honoring the path the Buddha walked, a path of wisdom, self-respect, and unshakable inner strength. Thank you for being part of Buddhist journey. If this message touched something within you, there's another video waiting on your screen that I think your heart is ready for. Watch it next. And until then, stay rooted, stay kind, and remember, your peace is sacred.